What up, y'all? Hope everybody's well. Hope you're having a good day. Welcome back to the Onyx Report's Black Masculinist News for the day. Today I have an interesting one. Something that some of you may have seen on social media. I didn't want to put the video up at all, really. But some of you may have seen this piece, right? I watched it a while back. I noticed on YouTube, the video link I had for it was shut down, which is why I wasn't about to play anything because I don't know what's going on with it. But this particular woman is basically holding a small little mic in her hand and she's recording a video. And what she's talking about is her interest in dating felons. And one of the things she starts to talk about, because the way it's presented, she's upset about a man she's with or was with who may have cheated on her or broke up with her, upset her in some way, shape, or form. And one of the things she says, the advantage to dating with, and I'm not quoting, this is paraphrased, but the advantage to her dating felons is that if they upset her, she can call the police. She can accuse them of something. She's even talking about making up something, and the extent to which she can impact their entire lives and send them back to jail on a whim. I find it interesting, terrifying, but interesting. And I realized it's not limited to women in her position. I mean, after Me Too, pretty much, especially, for black males, anybody can do it. Accusing black males of something they didn't do, the accusation is treated as verifiably true more often than not. But this is somebody who goes out her way, apparently, to date felons. Now, is this real? Can't say. I mean, there's so much in social media today that sometimes it's just a performance. But the reason I pointed this out is because I do know, and I've seen this since middle school, really, that there are women that do talk about this, that do talk about being in a position to date men who are vulnerable to accusation, right? Especially if they already had a prison record. And they don't necessarily need to do anything egregious to upset her, but really just not be controlled. Do something she doesn't like, not do something she wants them to do, even something that she wants them to do, but they have move in with her, marry her. Like, she can choose to impact them negatively simply because they may not choose to live the life she wants them to live with her. Now, I had a conversation with a man a couple months ago, and he was talking to me about his wife and her friends, and the extent to which her friends, all of whom were making six figures, were going out their way to be with felons, ex-felons, ex-cons, and she talked about, he told me about how they were complaining about these men, many of whom they married, but they complained about these men's inability to earn six figures. They complained about, having to give these men an allowance when they wanted to go out. I mean, they pretty much were stay-at-home fathers. Sometimes they would have, jobs, but anything could happen. The security they had at their jobs was weak. So they may be unemployed at any point in time, but she made enough for both. But in as much as these women were complaining about how incapable their men and their husbands were and how disappointed they were in them as ex-cons, situations could have been avoided. You didn't have to marry them. You didn't have to be with them. But they had children with them, they were living with them, and like I said, in instances, they were married to them, and yet spent all their time together complaining about the men they chose. But one of the things we talked about after he shared that with me, he asked me, why do you think they do this? Because he said, I'm seeing it not only with my wife's friends, but my sister's friends. And he was like, I don't understand what's going on. I said, well, I think what you have here is control. Control. Especially ex-cons, they're stereotyped as being hyper aggressive, masculine, hyper masculine, dominant, the quote unquote Pookie and Ray Rays that are exemplary of real masculinity because, they're straightforward, they can be brutal, all these kinds of stereotypes and tropes that go back to these ideas about true manhood and how you can only find it in, brothers at the street level or ex-cons or whatever. But the reality is those guys in many instances are very much vulnerable to accusation, to arbitrary accusation. And you have women, especially when you're talking about those who are employed and, have advanced degrees. And like I said, the guy I talked to, he was actually saying many of the women he's talking about have master's degrees and were making six figures. And he was wondering, why were these women marrying ex-cons? Well, part of the reason was, they wanted companionship. They wanted reproduction on their terms. They wanted to be the decision makers and heads of households. They weren't interested necessarily. And he and I, kind of talked this through. There's not enough time for me to go into it now. But we talked about how the kind of men that were on par with those women would not be controlled. And those women avoided men that, were on par with them. They would claim to want them in one vein, but being with men who are in a similar or better position than they were and were not willing to be told what to do, not willing to be controlled in a particular way, was unattractive. So they settled for men that were considered masculine in regard that they enjoyed, but could also be controlled. And if they weren't controlled, if they weren't compliant, would be sent back to jail as a threat. That was an ongoing threat that these women would make against their men to maintain a certain degree of compliance. Control, reproduction on her terms. Interesting ways to look at it. But if you run across this piece, feel free to tell me what you think. I may include a link. I only saw it on Facebook. I saw it on YouTube for a minute. They took it off. I don't know if it's still on Facebook. Those of you who are on my channel, on my Facebook page, you can scroll down. I have it posted up there in the last week. But at the end of the day, it's a gross display of an exploitive and toxic femininity that looks for appearance, seemingly hypermasculine men for control, for the purposes of controlling and exploiting on her terms. And I mean exploiting in regard to not only reproduction when she wants to, right, but also in terms of sex and sex work, right? There's a degree of exploiting happening, because if you don't provide her sex and or reproduction when she wants it, she has no problem threatening you or sending you back to jail on a trumped up charge. Call it what you like. I call it toxic femininity, but that doesn't really exist, right? Right. All right, y'all. Peace.